Hey guys, it's Misty from the Book Rat, and it's time for this month's book chat. Now before I get into it, I just want to warn you, the building that I live in is being re-sided, so there's a good chance that you're going to hear some banging and construction cursing and various things. I was trying to wait for them to take a break so that I could record when it was quiet, but apparently they don't ever take a break. Because Austen in August has officially started, I figured the perfect topic for this month's chat would be classics. So this is a really broad topic, and there are a lot of things that we can talk about. I want you to kind of interpret it your way and talk about the things that you want to talk about. So it can be about whether you read classics, what your favorite classics are, whether you don't read classics and why, what you think makes a classic, whatever it is that you want to talk about. I'm just going to ramble and we're going to see where this goes. For me, a classic, I think there are two kind of definitions to it. There are the things that you're taught in school, that we continue to be taught in school, whether or not they remain relevant at their core. They're canonical and they were chosen by, scholars. And they're always supposed to be highbrow and very literary, and I think that is what leaves a sour taste in people's mouths when they think of classic. I think the other definition of classic is something that's just timeless. No matter when it was written, no matter what it's about, there's something so true at its core and so human about it that we connect to it even when we're so far removed from the circumstances. For me, I've always been a classics lover, and I'm not entirely sure why that is, other than the fact that they take place in different times. Who is it that says I was nostalgic from a very early age? Britta from Community. Yeah, I guess I've always sort of longed for that type of escapism. I know that I wouldn't necessarily have survived in any other era, but there are aspects of other eras that I love to just kind of dive into and escape this one for a while. There's so many quotes about, those who read have lived more lives than those who don't, and how books are a great vacation and great escape and things like that. And obviously those are all true. And I think that's part of what I love about classics, is they are a vacation that you can never actually take. I mean, unless you find some, reenactment colony, you can't really escape to Regency England or ancient Egypt or anything like that. That's over. So a book is a way to sort of get to go the places that you want to go but can't. So I think that's part of why I've always liked them. I've always also loved language, so you get different aspects of language, so that's probably part of what has always appealed to me too. But when I was a kid, I just flat out liked them. I really couldn't tell you why more than that. Oliver Twist was my favorite book when I was probably 8 or 9. I read it more times than I can count. I was also obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe. I loved The Fall of the House of Usher. I was a strange child, and then I went through a phase where I read a lot of horror and kind of got out of the classics, and I remember being 11 or 12 and we were being assigned Anne of Green Gables. For whatever reason, I did not want to read that book, and I was flat out refusing until I just had no choice. I mean, it was that or fail, and fell in love. I mean, Anne of Green Gables is one of my favorite books. I think that kind of pulled me back in and reconnected me with how great classics can be and how fantastic it is to have a story that is so different from your own and yet so much the same. It both expands and contracts your world at the same time. It shows you how similar we all are. No matter how much things change, they stay the same type of way. I think a lot of people's familiarity with classics is just what they read in school. And with those lists, you put these classics on your eventually to read list, knowing that you probably never will. I mean, you're Emma, drawing up lists that sound very good, but you're never going to actually touch them. And I think that's as far as some people get. I think for some people it feels like work, because you only read them in school and in college and had to write essays on them and have these discussions and watch really bad adaptations, and it just takes on this sort of Pavlovian response where you hear it and you just cringe because you're like, no, that's work, and I don't want to do work when I'm reading for pleasure. I think also sometimes people have trouble connecting with the language, so they give up and they just try to read classics, bits and pieces here and there, which I think is the absolute wrong way to go about it. I always talk about it as, if you're watching a movie where everyone has an accent, if you only watch 5 or 10 minutes here or there, it's always going to sound like gibberish to you. But if you sit down and you watch the whole thing through, the first 10 or 15 minutes are still going to be probably pretty hard to understand, but eventually you're going to get to a point where you're not even noticing it anymore. Your ear adjusts, suddenly you're making out the patterns, you're understanding what they're saying, and it becomes a non-issue. And I think it's the same with written language. If you just pick it up here or there, it's going to be like complete jargon. You're not going to understand any of it. But if you sit down and you sort of plug away at it and reread if you have to a little bit and then keep going, I think your mental ear adjusts and it suddenly becomes second nature, and the more you do it, the more familiar you will become with it. I think those things are kind of what holds people off from classics, just the work aspect and the fear that you're not going to understand it and the frustration with that. Now, as for my favorites, obviously with Austen and August and Jane and June, you already know that I'm a big fan of Jane Austen. I've read everything by her, even the fragments and the weird little juvenilia. Love her enough that I'm even willing to give Mansfield Park another chance. One of these days. So that's just a given. Other favorites, I already mentioned Anne of Green Gables and how much I adore that whole series. I was an Anne, you know? I think a lot of readers were Annes when they were kids, so it's hard not to love her. I was always a big Dickens fan. He's got a good absurd streak, and even though he's much more heavy-handed than I would normally like, I can't help but be amused by him and like him. Like most people, I love Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. I love a good bit of absurdity. I love Peter Pan. I do definitely have a soft spot for Jane Eyre. Love Oscar Wilde, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. There's so many good, vibrant voices. You know, there's a reason that they endure for so long. There are a lot of sort of classic plays that I love too. Anything by Henrik Ibsen, A Doll's House, Hedda Gabler, anything like that. George Bernard Shaw. So I mean, there are a lot. Pretty much all those things that you read in school, ones that it seems like everybody reads, and I think I really enjoyed most of them. There were a couple that I didn't necessarily love. Crime and Punishment just seemed so torturous to me. I liked parts of it, but good God, just no. A lot of the Russians, just lighten up, guys. I hated The Scarlet Letter. I'm not a huge Hawthorne fan. Oh, just that heavy-handed didactic symbolism just makes me want to rattle him, you know, just really shake him up. Yeah, not a fan, and I had to read that so many fucking times. I swear to God. So many, it was like every other year it seemed we would have to read The Scarlet Letter, or I would be assigned it for like a summer reading thing. Ugh. And Heart of Darkness. I think that all of those books that I just mentioned, all of those sort of older, literary on every single list ever type of books, are what people tend to think of when they're classics. But I don't think that you can discount the modern classics either. A lot of people put a sort of age restriction on classics. There are some that you read that you know are going to be classics. You know, they're new classics, they're instant classics. And there are some that are just now sort of hitting that mark where you can officially call them a classic. They've been around enough. To Kill a Mockingbird is one of my absolute favorite books, and I think that that will be on many classics lists for a long time to come. I think a lot of the sort of middle grade newer classics, you know, the ones that really weren't written that long ago, maybe 70s or 80s, have definitely earned their spot on the list. Things like Bridge to Terabithia, all the Roald Dahl books, Tuck Everlasting, you know, things like that that you tend to read when you're in elementary school. Things that you just love as a kid but can still appreciate as an adult as well. I think that those are going to be taught in schools and shared among children for a long, long time to come. I'm curious if you guys think that there are any books of our current generation that are also going to end up on the classics list. You know, is Harry Potter going to be the Chronicles of Narnia of the future? Is that one going to be around for the long haul? Are there any lesser known books that you love right now that you think have that staying power? And are there any classics that you've been meaning to read for the longest time and just haven't got around to? So I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you read classics? Are there ones that you definitely love? Are there ones that you will never read? Does it feel too much like work to you? What are your favorites? Just curious to hear your thoughts. If you do your own video, make sure you link it up as a video response below. And if you do a vlog or a blog post, you can share it on the linky at thebookrat.com. I will leave that below. That's all from me for this month's book chat. As always, happy reading! Whether it's classics or trash, enjoy. Yeah, see, that's the banging I was talking about. It's really fun to wake up to that.